Story 1. About 10 years ago, I was happily engaged to a woman I'll call Karen. We had known each other for about 9 years, but had only been dating for one. Everything seemed perfect. She had her dream engagement ring, we had a nice house together, both had steady jobs, and the wedding plans were coming along nicely. Then, about 2 months before the wedding, we found out we were going to have a baby. The happiness was indescribable, and the wedding plans continued as we prepared for this new chapter in our lives. The big day was only 28 days away. One day, I came home from work and noticed Karen wasn't there. I called her to see if she got held up at work or what time she might be home. But she wasn't at work, she was at her grandmother's house in another state. Calmly, she told me that she no longer wanted to get married and that she wasn't coming home. I was in complete shock. What just happened? I tried calling her back, but her phone was off. I called her grandmother, but there was no answer. What about the wedding? What about our baby? What about everything? No answers. No contact for 3 days. 3 days passed with no word from her, no clues, nothing. On the 4th day, Karen showed up and started packing her stuff. She wouldn't say a word to me. Nothing. She left and later sent me an email saying that she couldn't be with me, again without giving any reasons. I started calling her sister, trying to figure out what had happened. Her sister claimed to have no idea, but gave me their mom's phone number. That was odd because Karen had told me her mom was out of the picture due to being an abusive alcoholic. But I was desperate, so I called. Her mom told me I was lucky number 3 who had fallen for this trap. Apparently, Karen had cut her mom out of her life, so she couldn't ruin Karen's game of milking guys for money and resources. Karen had been pregnant twice before and had miscarriages, all the while milking the men involved for everything they had before running off to her super Christian grandmother's house, claiming abuse until the dust settled. Then, she'd do it all over again. Weeks went by with no contact from Karen. I was a wreck, lost 20 pounds, got counseled at work for poor performance, and my family was furious. Relatives lost money on travel plans for the wedding, and I was humiliated. I lost all the deposits for the wedding since it was canceled less than 30 days out, and I was broke. I checked our joint bank account, negative $2,000. Great. I couldn't even pay the mortgage. Slowly, I started pulling myself together, and my sadness turned into rage. I was so angry that I had to scale it back a bit to avoid doing something that would land me in prison. A month and a half after the split, I got a text from Karen. It'd read, "I had a miscarriage. You stress me out too much, and my daughter is dead now." Daughter? I was having a daughter? And she was blaming me. I was ready to explode. But instead of letting my anger control me, I took a deep breath and decided to take Karen apart piece by piece. Most of her stuff was still at my house, which I had to walk away from because I couldn't afford it. I started packing up her things, trying to figure out how to get rid of it all. That's when I stumbled upon a few items: her resume and her checkbook. I read through her resume, it was full of lies, just like everything else. I hopped on the computer, created a new email address, and sent a detailed letter to her corporate office, exposing every lie in her resume. That felt good. Then, I moved on to her checkbook. I signed her name on every check, ripped them out, and drove 30 minutes to the seediest part of town. I left them on the sidewalk in front of a convenience store, let someone else deal with that. When I got back home, I threw out the rest of her stuff. Everything except her laptop, I kept that. 2 weeks later, Karen called. I didn't answer, but her voicemail said she had been laid off due to budget cuts. I knew that wasn't true. Another small victory. A few more weeks went by, and letters from a bad check restitution program started arriving in the mail. I shredded those, along with the registration renewal for her car. While I was at it, I put in a change of address for her at the post office, forwarding everything to a homeless shelter. Through a mutual friend, I learned Karen was now staying with friends and being supported financially by her super Christian grandmother. Time for my next move. I logged into her laptop, made another new email address similar to hers, and sent her grandmother a video of Karen that I had saved, titling it, Hey Grandma, check out this video I took at my job. Hope I uploaded it right. The reply: You are disgusting. I hope your new job pays well because I'm not supporting you if you act like that. Double win: embarrassment and financial distress. Weeks passed, and then I got a call from a furniture rental company. Turns out all of Karen's furniture was rent to own. I told them I didn't have it and didn't know where it was. That night, I burned it all in the yard. They said she owed forward $200. Too bad. Soon after, I found out Karen had a new job. As I planned my next move, I got even better news. Karen had been arrested for embezzlement. Apparently, she had some money problems and stole $5,000 from petty cash at work. She got caught. I couldn't believe my luck. Months went by with no updates, and then I heard she was bailed out by her grandmother after only a few days. Karen ended up taking a plea bargain, getting a felony conviction, 3 years of probation, and restitution. Perfect. I was ready to hang up my hat and call it a day. My revenge was complete. Then, a couple of months later, the phone rang. It was a repossession company looking for Karen's whereabouts to repossess her car. I couldn't resist. I made a few calls, found out where she was staying, and passed the information on to the repo company. They offered me a $100 reward, but I told them, no thanks, this one's on me. Karen is now a felon, jobless, and a single mom with a kid she recently had with some random guy. She lives in an apartment with her brother and his girlfriend. Meanwhile, I'm happily married with a beautiful daughter and a great life. Yesterday, I got a Facebook message from Karen. It said, "Congrats on the marriage and daughter. I'm glad you're happy." I replied, "Go away." She blocked me. Life is good. Story 2. This incident happened when I was 17 and my brother was 15. We both play tennis for our high school, and our dad often trains us on weekends. One weekend, while my dad was training us as usual, we noticed a drone flying overhead. At first, we thought it was pretty cool since it wasn't flying too close to us, so we didn't pay much attention to it. We assumed the operator was in the grassland next to the courts. As time went on, the drone got closer and started making it difficult to concentrate, but we managed to keep playing. My dad had my brother and me play a best 3 out of 5 match. That's when the drone became really annoying, constantly buzzing around both sides of the court. We were having a hard time keeping the ball away from it. But then it happened. The drone got too low, and while my brother was hitting the ball, it smacked right into the drone. We both freaked out, scared about what just happened. Our dad was inside the pro shop, so we shouted and waved for him to come out. When he saw the drone, he started walking toward us. Meanwhile, my brother and I were still in shock, trying to figure out what to do. That's when we heard a man shout, "Are you kidding me?" We knew then that we were in trouble. The man, who we'll call entitled Dad, was walking around all the courts trying to find his drone. He didn't seem to care that people were in the middle of their games. When he finally found his drone on our court, he just walked right onto it without any warning. We had to stop our game so he wouldn't get hit. That's when everything went south. Entitled Dad, do you know what you idiots have done? Me, hey man, that wasn't our fault. You're the one flying it over a tennis court. Entitled Dad, that's why you're supposed to play around it. Do you know how much this thing cost me? Bro, we don't care. We tried to avoid it, but we couldn't. You were careless enough to put it in harm's way. It was like you were asking for someone to hit it. The 3 of us were arguing when my dad noticed the commotion and started approaching the court, racket in hand. That's when Entitled Dad started hurling insults at me. Entitled Dad, you stupid witch. Women are too dumb to understand when they're in the wrong. A witch like you should just stick to sucking up to other guys. Dad, sir, what did you just say to my daughter? Entitled Dad, this is your daughter. You let her dress like a witch. Some father you are. For context, I was wearing Spanx and a baggy t-shirt, typical athletic wear. Dad, why are you even looking at her like that? She's an athlete. She has to wear clothes that allow her to move around. And if you call her a witch one more time, you're going to regret it. Entitled Dad. Ooh, I'm so scared. The big scary dad is going to protect his witchy daughter. Without another word, my dad hit him in the shin with his racket. If you've ever been hit in the shin by a racket, you know it hurts a lot. Entitled Dad dropped to the ground, clutching his leg. My dad bent down to his level and told him to get lost. Entitled Dad grabbed his drone and limped toward the pro shop. About 10 minutes later, the cops arrived. Entitled Dad had called the police on us, claiming we had purposely destroyed his drone and that my dad had assaulted him. Cop 1. Hello, kids. How are you doing today? Me, we're fine, just trying to practice. Is everything all right? Cop 1. Well, a gentleman in the shop called us out here. He said you destroyed his drone and had your dad beat him. My dad explained everything to the officers, admitting that he hit the guy in the shin with his racket. He also mentioned the cameras on the drone and around the tennis courts. Cop 2. Thanks for letting us know what happened. Could you follow us to the shop? We want to review all the footage. We gathered our things and met them inside. Entitled Dad was sitting on the couch, sulking, while downloading the footage from his drone onto his laptop for the cops to see. It turned out he got fined because he didn't have the proper license and certification to fly a drone. The officers took his laptop into the office where the security monitors were, and they watched all the footage they needed. Cop 2. Young lady, how old are you? Me, I just turned 17. Why? Cop 1 and Cop 2 exchanged looks. Cop 1 then put Entitled Dad in cuffs and told him he was under arrest. I assumed it was because he had been flying his drone illegally or something. Cop 2. Miss, I'm not sure how to say this, but Entitled Dad was recording your backside. Would you like to press charges? My face turned red with embarrassment and anger. I couldn't even speak. I was so shocked. My dad was furious. He looked like he was ready to rip the guy's head off. Dad, press charges against him. He's a pervert. Cop 2. You heard him, bud. Cop 1 escorted Entitled Dad to the squad car, while Cop 2 took statements from the three of us. I was trying to hold back tears, but I was so mad. My dad and brother both hugged me, and I finally let the tears flow. Dad drove us home and called my mom to tell her what happened. She came over with my sisters and our dogs to comfort me. Entitled Dad was sent to jail. I'm not sure for how long, but the thought of what happened still haunts me. Story 3. At the time, I was 20 years old and dating my first true love. We had been together for about a year and a half, and everything seemed great. Her mother really liked me, and she owned a successful company that traded in children's fashion clothing, making a substantial amount of money. They needed someone to drive one of their 3.5-ton trucks, and her mother suggested hiring me. I wasn't happy with the job I had at the time, so this seemed like a win-win situation. I accepted her offer, and we started working together. The job was okay, even though I had to work a lot of overtime. She thoroughly introduced me to how the entire company operated. Her business included a large storage facility, a store, and 2 trucks, one that I drove and a larger one. I worked for her for about a year, and during that time, I learned every detail about the company because she trusted me with its secrets, which would come in handy later. Then, things took a huge turn. I discovered that my girlfriend had cheated on me with her ex. I broke up with her instantly. It was an ugly situation, and afterward, I called her mother to explain what had happened. I told her that I didn't want to mix personal issues with business, and that I would continue working, even though I no longer wanted to see her daughter. Her mother assured me everything was fine, but of course, she sided with her daughter. I could sense she was upset with me because of the breakup. I continued going to work and acting professionally, putting the drama aside. However, soon after, she began singling me out, looking for mistakes so she could discipline me. This went on for months, and I realized she was just waiting for an excuse to fire me. But I wasn't going to give her that reason so easily. She was frustrated that she couldn't find any major mistakes, and the small ones she often made up weren't enough to terminate me. So, she came up with a plan. On the truck, we had a power generator that provided electricity for lights, a laptop, a printer, and other equipment. It could run on fuel when we were on the road or be connected to a cable when we were at the storage facility. However, it wasn't installed by a professional company. They had hired an electrician who made an error. We had to flip a switch whenever we used it with a cable connection. Otherwise, it would burn out. One day, while I was loading the truck, she convinced a coworker to flip the switch back. After a few minutes, the lights went out, and I realized something was wrong. The generator had burned out. I knew I hadn't forgotten to flip the switch because I had been loading the truck for over an hour, and it only took 5 minutes for the generator to burn out if the switch was in the wrong position. It couldn't have been my fault. However, she didn't even listen to my side of the story. She started yelling, fired me on the spot, and told me she was going to deduct the repair costs from my last paycheck, so I shouldn't expect any money from her. I didn't take that lightly and told her, "I don't think you want to go down this path with me," but she refused to listen. It took a few days for me to cool down, but I wanted to give her one last chance. I called her and told her that I knew she had set me up, but if she paid me my last paycheck, I would let it go, and we wouldn't have to see each other again. She told me to get lost, so I came up with a plan. First, I knew that her store didn't have a bathroom, which was illegal in my country. The shop assistants had an agreement with a restaurant across the street to use their facilities. I reported this to the authorities, and the next day, they closed the shop due to this violation, telling her she couldn't reopen until they installed a bathroom. She called me immediately and asked if I had anything to do with it. I laughed and replied, "Didn't I tell you that you don't want to go down this path with me?" and then hung up. Next, I knew we had worked so much overtime that both I and the other truck driver had exceeded the legal driving hours on our tachographs, which record driving time, speed, and rest periods. I reported this to the authorities as well. They checked all the records and slapped the company with a hefty fine. She sent me angry text messages all day, but I simply replied, "I'm not done yet." Then, silence. A few hours later, she called and asked if we could talk things over. She even claimed she had sent my last paycheck, but I shut her down immediately and told her, "Too late for that." Finally, I contacted the fire department and reported that the store's wiring was outdated and caused frequent short circuits. I also mentioned that they only had 2 fire extinguishers for the entire place when they should have had at least 12 to 15. That very day, they closed the storage facility as well, so she lost the last place where she could generate income for months, until they updated all the wiring and brought everything up to code, which cost a fortune. Because of the fines and other penalties, she couldn't afford these renovations. A few months later, she filed for bankruptcy. I know this because my ex-girlfriend called me and said, "I hope you're happy, you jerk. You made my family go bankrupt." I never got my paycheck, but at that point, I didn't even care. I was satisfied with the outcome. Update. I've received a bunch of messages from people asking questions, so I thought it would be best to make an update instead of responding individually. Here's what happened after. A few months later, the tax authorities, or what some of you might know as the IRS, seized almost everything from her store, inventory, storage, trucks, everything. She received so many fines from different authorities that she couldn't pay them. After everything was gone, she had to sell her house, move into a smaller apartment, and she never owned a business again. As far as I know, she's now working as a clerk in a store. Things aren't looking good for her. As for my ex-girlfriend, she got married to the next guy and now has 4 kids. After the second child, she really let herself go, and looking back, I'm glad I didn't have a child with her. I'm not trying to fat shame her, but let's just say I dodged a bullet. At least she and her husband are still together, so maybe, just maybe, she learned a lesson and didn't cheat on him. Or so I hope. As for me, I had a long relationship after her, and I have a son from that relationship. But we eventually separated because she turned out to be a lazy gold digger. After 5 years, we went our separate ways. But then, I met the love of my life. After almost 9 years together, we're still happy. She also came out of a terrible relationship involving abuse and domestic violence, so she truly appreciates me, and I feel the same way about her. I love her to death. I hope this answers everyone's questions. Take care, everyone. Story 4. Backstory. Jerk was a baseball prodigy, getting scouted by colleges. However, due to not warming up properly, he kept injuring his arm, which derailed his promising baseball career. To make matters worse, he had a serious drinking problem. Night after night, he would go out to a bar, get blackout drunk, and repeat the cycle. The story. One night, Jerk was driving drunk again somewhere in Joliet, Illinois. He was swerving on the road, and, as expected, he got pulled over. He failed every sobriety test and was sent to jail. Due to several prior duties, his license was suspended, and he was sentenced to 2 months in county jail. During his time in lockup, Jerk somehow managed to find out where the officer who had arrested him lived. Once he was released, he enlisted a friend, and they went to a gas station where they filled 2 jerry cans with gasoline. They then drove to the officer's house. Jerk began to douse the exterior of the house with gasoline, unaware that the officer's family was inside. He lit a match and fled the scene. Fortunately, some neighbors witnessed the getaway and reported it to the police. The officer's family managed to escape the house, and the fire department arrived shortly after. What followed was a manhunt for Jerk, who was eventually caught and sent to jail to await trial. Incredibly, he chose to fight the charges, basing his entire defense on the claim that the officer had been rude to him, making up things that weren't true. During the trial, his mother, the entitled mom, showed up and argued with the judge over the charges, insisting that her precious baby could do no wrong and that the officer deserved to have his house burned down. This got her barred from the courtroom for the remainder of the trial. In the end, Jerk was sentenced to 20 years in the Illinois State Prison on 4 counts of attempted murder. He was released after 6 years for good behavior. Edit 1. Clarification. His mother passed away in 2010, about 6 years after the trial. My mom stayed with him, believing he would eventually change for the better, but he only got worse after moving to Colorado. Although he has improved somewhat, he now reserves his drinking for the weekends. Edit 2. Aftermath. Despite everything, my mom stayed with Jerk, something she regrets deeply now. He moved to Colorado for reasons I can't quite remember, and my mom followed him shortly after. With his Dewey record seemingly cleared in Colorado, he got his license back and promptly started racking up Deweys again. He began cheating on my mom and started drinking heavily around my 3-year-old sister and me. In 2012, things took a violent turn. We lived in an apartment complex with hotel-style locks that required a key card. One night, Jerk got drunk and wanted to go out partying again. My mom begged him to stay, but he left, only to realize he had forgotten his car keys. My mom locked him out, but Jerk kicked in the metal door, shattering a mirror in the process. I watched as the entire lock assembly flew off the door, landing a few feet away from me. Jerk grabbed his keys, and my mom called the police. He was arrested a few miles down the road. My mom, sister, and I were placed in a protective house program called Sprout House, where we stayed for a year while Jerk served time in county jail. After his release, he began stalking my mom, despite a restraining order that required him to stay 500 feet away from her. Somehow, he got too close and was arrested again, this time sentenced to 2 years in the Colorado State Prison. After his release, he got drunk again and crashed his van, landing him another 2 years in county jail. That was the last time he's been in jail since. Edit 3. Final update. My mom is no longer with him and is happily married to the man of her dreams. Jerk has sobered up somewhat, as he is now in a committed relationship and has a 3-year-old child of his own. He is no longer violent and seems to have made some positive changes, although some things never completely change. Story 5. To set the scene, I had been working in a small jewelry store for almost half a year as a temporary employee while studying. The store was part of a chain that had 2 locations in my city, both situated very close to each other. We sold bracelets, necklaces, rings, and other items for smaller budgets, meaning the jewelry was often cheap and, frankly, quite ugly. The store I worked for didn't have a store manager at the time, so it was co-managed by the manager of the second store and the oldest coworker of mine, who had been there for 16 years. Overall, the experience was fine. I liked my coworkers, my shifts, and the amount of work assigned to me. My tasks included unpacking merchandise, ringing up customers, helping them, and a bit of cleaning every now and then. I was aware of the somewhat crazy upper management of the chain, but I hadn't encountered them directly. The rules were simple: do your work, be efficient, which meant that if they took a surprise visit and saw you standing around, you were likely to receive a write-up or worse, and, most importantly, sell as much as you could. However, visits from the area manager, who plays a major role in this story, as she is truly a piece of work, were rare and usually announced in advance. I'm a tidy person. I did my work correctly, was almost never late, and took shifts from my co-workers whenever they had a problem. As I said, everything was fine until half a year later when our store got a new manager. At first, I thought we'd all get along. The new manager learned the basics from the other store manager, which made us think things would be okay since we got along well with the other store. Oh boy, were we wrong. The first few weeks went without any major issues. She mainly just observed us doing our jobs to see our routines. Then, the craziness started. The first thing the new manager, who I'll call Evil Maniac, did was convene a staff meeting. She told us point blank that our attitude towards customers was terrible, that we were generally terrible, and that our sales were too low, which was also terrible. Most of my coworkers were in their 40s to late 50s, sweet, funny, and reliable ladies, but in Evil Maniac's eyes, they were terrible too. She wanted her team to be young. She then announced that she would fully assume her manager role from that point on, and that things would be changing drastically. And they did. Here's a list of my all-time favorite stunts pulled by Evil Maniac. She started rearranging all of our stuff daily. Nothing was where it used to be, and I had to search for everything every single time. Customers asking for gift cards. Sure, if I knew where they were. I didn't, since Evil Maniac decided to put them in a different place for the third time in just 1 week. It was incredibly embarrassing to tell customers that I couldn't give them a gift card because I simply couldn't find them. The same applied to the storeroom, where Evil Maniac regularly rampaged like a tornado. Leaving it in chaos, I would clean it up in a desperate attempt to regain order and control. She forbade us from unpacking freshly arrived merchandise after 12 p.m. mind you. The store only opened at 10 a.m., and sometimes 3 packages full of tiny earrings needed unpacking while I was completely alone in the store, helping customers and dealing with the daily crazies. This meant that the packages piled up in our tiny backroom storage room, making it almost impossible to enter the room and fulfill customer requests to check the back. Would you? I tried talking to her, explaining that this was not an optimal situation, and that we simply needed more time to unpack merchandise. Evil Maniac replied that she could do all of this in only 3 seconds if we didn't always talk so much. Lady, I was alone in the store. Who exactly did she think I was talking to? Anyway, shy as I was at that point, I tried to adapt. She started harassing my older coworkers. The assistant manager, a gruff but sweet 55-year-old lady who had been working there for 16 years, was constantly criticized by Evil Maniac. Suddenly, assistant manager was accused of not being friendly enough to customers despite no one ever complaining, of closing the store uncleaned and messy, even though I had helped assistant manager arrange the jewelry the night before, and of being unwilling to work because she took care of her 4-year-old grandchild on Wednesdays. Evil Maniac would often post mean messages in our WhatsApp group chat, only to delete them after a few seconds or leave the group like a toddler throwing a tantrum because assistant manager wouldn't swap shifts with her when there was a day to work between holidays. During my half-year under her management, we had to create at least 3 new groups because she kept leaving in a rage fit. She messed with our shift plan. Due to the various WhatsApp groups we had, multiple shift plans were in circulation. She would put us in shifts without notifying or asking us. If any of us asked to be removed, she would lose it and instruct us to be available 24/7 since that's what we are paid for. Often, co-workers would not show up for work because they didn't know they were scheduled. The shifts Evil Maniac designed were also really dumb, and she seemed to want to screw us over on purpose. One of my older co-workers had to commute almost an hour and a half to work and once asked Evil Maniac to schedule her for shifts longer than her commuting time. Evil Maniac wanted to get rid of the older ladies, so she scheduled this specific co-worker for 2-hour shifts because, and I quote, "She's already older and probably can't be on her feet for long. I'm doing her a favor." She started stalking us. Once, she took a week off, and everyone sighed in relief because it meant a week without her constant rage fits, false accusations, and general moodiness. Her last order before leaving was that the small trash bin we kept next to the register had to be placed under the register, as she believed it disturbed the customer experience. For us, unpacking merchandise became incredibly impractical because we had to reach under the register every time in a 2 centimeters gap between the desk and the floor. So, we decided to put it next to the register while unpacking. She wasn't there and wouldn't know. Right, wrong. The phone rang. Assistant manager picked up and was confronted with a screaming Evil Maniac demanding to know why the trash bin wasn't under the register as it was supposed to be, and how dare we unpack merchandise after 12 p.m. This lady had nothing better to do than stalk us during her free time. The final straw for me was her last stunt. It was the Saturday between Good Friday and Easter Sunday, a highly busy day in retail. I was scheduled for a shift starting at 10 am. Evil Maniac was supposed to show up at 11 am. But she decided to cancel her shift completely, leaving me completely alone in the chaos with no change for the register since she hadn't bothered to get any in advance. Soon, I ran out of coins, and customers started getting irritated because I couldn't give them their change. I frantically called my co-worker, who was only supposed to arrive at 2 p.m., and begged her to come in earlier so I could run to the bank for change. Luckily, she was already in town and showed up half an hour later. I was just done with Evil Maniac at this point. She completely abandoned me, a temp, and wouldn't take my calls begging her to come in and help me out. If the situation had been reversed, I wouldn't have survived to share these stories with you. At this point, I had had enough. I don't know why I put up with it for so long, but I was young and needed the money. Pun intended. I hope you're still here. I know this is a long story, but the best part is yet to come. So, I sat down and wrote a letter formal yet honest. I stated that the shift planning was terrible, that the old shift system before Evil Maniac's time worked much better, and that her behavior was disrupting our work processes. I even explicitly stated that this wasn't an attack on her leadership qualities, but an honest request to improve teamwork and atmosphere. I showed the letter to my co-workers, asked if they were okay with it, and signed it on behalf of the team. I left the letter on the door and asked Evil Maniac the next time I worked with her if she'd seen the letter and if she had any comments. With the sweetest smile, she said that everything was fine, nothing to worry about. A few weeks later, I was finally allowed to take the vacation I had fought for what felt like an eternity. Suddenly, I received a message on my phone saying something along the lines of this. Evil Maniac, Anemia, there is a staff meeting coming up. I recommend you show up, or else. Me, I'm sorry, but I won't be able to attend the meeting as I'm currently on vacation and not in the country. Evil Maniac, it is mandatory. There is no sorry. Be there or else. Me, no. I will not come. I'm not even in the country. What do you expect me to do? Besides, I'm on vacation. I don't have to work. Evil Maniac, I don't care. All I can say is be there, or there will be consequences. I didn't reply to this madness and blocked her for the time being. Later that evening, I received another text message from one of my older co-workers saying something like this. Coworker, hey Anemia, just be glad you didn't show up. You were declared the Antichrist of the century. The reason we all had to meet was your letter, which the area manager, remember the other hell spawn I mentioned, ripped to shreds. saying you personally attacked the store manager who felt offended and insulted by your audacity to write this garbage. Me? A what? Coworker. Yeah, she even sent the evidence to the central office and requested an official complaint against you. Me? Okay, whatever. Coworker. The area manager then wanted to know who participated in this nonsense and said that anybody who wants to quit can do it right now. I have the paperwork right here. Who is this Anemia girl anyway? Is she 5 or what? What does this even mean? She doesn't want to be 6 hours alone in the store? If she needs to use the bathroom, she can call security. Just be glad you didn't have to be there. She made the assistant manager cry. Me, fine, I'm done with it. Coworker, me too. Plans were starting to form in my head, plans of revenge. At this point, there were 7 staff members in the store, including me. 4 of them were similarly done with evil maniacs nonsense. They were disgusted by how I had been treated, knowing that I was a good worker and had put up with a lot of evil maniacs crap. We were friends, which led to a fatal decision for the store. We decided to quit. All of us. My older co-workers, all of whom had worked there for more than 10 years, and I left the store with only Evil Maniac and 2 newbies. However, we didn't give Evil Maniac any notice. Instead, we sent our resignations directly to the central office, where my letter had been sent, all while Evil Maniac was on vacation. My older co-workers all went to their doctors to get sick notes, but I had different plans. I wanted to mess with Evil Maniac as much as possible. So, I stayed and followed Evil Maniac's ridiculous orders meticulously. Want me to stop unpacking stuff at 12 p.m.? Fine. I'll just let all of this cheap junk pile up in the back. Want me to come into work without telling me? Sorry, I didn't get the memo, and whoopsie, my phone is in flight mode. The best part, however, was this. Our store offered earlobe piercing. It was never a requirement for anyone, but suddenly it became one. I don't wear earrings and never felt comfortable piercing someone's ear in the middle of a busy store. Up to this point, I never had to. Now, Evil Maniac and the area manager forced me to do it. Standing in front of a customer, holding the piercing machine, I decided to let my emotions take over and started having a crying fit, muttering something like, I really don't want to do this. Why are you making me? It certainly made a great impression on the customers. Then my last month was over. The store was a mess because the newbies didn't know what they were doing, and I didn't feel like helping them anymore. The storage room was almost inaccessible, and sales dropped even further. I left with a smile, leaving Evil Maniac with no trained staff since they all left out of loyalty to me. The last thing I heard was that the other store in my city had given up helping Evil Maniac because her entitlement, laziness, and arrogance finally started to show. Without the older ladies and me holding everything together, the store's appearance crumbled. The other store manager won't even speak to Evil Maniac anymore because Evil Maniac insulted her when she refused to cover Evil Maniac's shifts. I've heard there's debate over whether the store should remain open or not. Sadly, there was a lot more going on behind the scenes between Evil Maniac and assistant manager that we didn't know about. An assistant manager is now in psychological treatment, but has been doing much better in recent weeks. All of us are now in a better place. Thank you for reading all of this. I know it's been long, but it felt so good to write it all down I couldn't stop myself.